This is the story of American freedom. To understand the role of our second great progressive president in the story of American freedom, I ask you to go back with me to March the 4th, 1933. We are in Washington, D.C. on a cold and rather drizzly day. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is about to be inaugurated as President of the United States. And you're sitting huddled around a radio in one of the few remaining stores in your town that's still opened. You've been out of work for 2 years. All the wonderful appliances, the home you bought for your family have been lost. You don't know from day to day how you are going to feed your family. You take them into soup lines. And the government, under President Herbert Hoover, seems to do nothing. You have no confidence. You've even begun to listen to communist agitators or fascist agitators who talk about how Benito Mussolini has brought prosperity to Italy. The democracy you dreamt of seems failed. You never could have imagined that in 1917, while your whole college class, all the boys rose up en masse and marched off to enlist. Those Yanks who went over there and would not come back until it was over there. You came back, Belgian croix de guerre, French croix de guerre, got a good job, went into the stock market, gave your family, your wife and children a good living. And then suddenly, in October of 1929, after having listened to all the experts say that there would never be another depression, that we had moved to a new economic model, a new plateau, everything collapsed, and nobody could explain why. But you, along with millions of Americans, had lost your job. And those croix de guerres, why, they weren't worth even a dime in a pawn shop. What had you fought for? Why had this happened to you? Well, in 1932, you had gone to the polls, and in a landslide swept Herbert Hoover out of office. All but 6 states voting for this Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a mediocre governor of New York. Who was Franklin Roosevelt, and what had brought him to this great moment in American life, in the story of American freedom? He was a distant cousin of Theodore. Like Theodore, he came from great wealth, had a trust fund, went to Harvard, was not a spectacular student. In fact, in those days at Harvard, you had to write to the president to get permission, president of the university, to get permission to miss class. So, invited to his cousin's inauguration, young Franklin wrote to the president of Harvard, and the president wrote back, judging from your record, Mr. Roosevelt, you don't seem to do much when you were in class, so I don't see any reason why you should not attend the inauguration. But he graduated, went to Columbia Law School, began briefly the practice of law, married his distant cousin, Eleanor, and then in 1913 was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He wanted to be part of the administration of Woodrow Wilson, another great progressive president. Like Theodore, like Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt believed that we had progressed beyond the values of the founders. They were good values, but they needed to be made to work in an industrial world, in a new world. And the Navy seemed the perfect place to do it. There he was, like Theodore, working to prepare the American Navy, seeing it through World War I, gaining some ideas already then that would help him in planning a strategy to stop the German U-boat attacks during World War II. And then, at the height of his physical vigor, on a summer vacation at his beloved Campobello Island, out boating with his children, they noticed a fire burning. Well, they jumped out, put that fire out, and got back in their boat, and Franklin suddenly began to feel tired. Well, he thought a good swim would put him back in shape, as it always did, but it didn't work this time. Came in, thought a drink might help, but it didn't work. He told his wife, Eleanor, Babs as he called her, "I just don't feel good." He started up the steps to go to bed and collapsed. What was it? They were distant from good medical care, but the local doctor said, "Oh, it's probably just a cold or influenza." But suddenly, in that night, his legs became paralyzed. Well, the same kind of medical aid suggested massages. Intensely painful. But they carried on until finally Eleanor demanded that a specialist from New York see him. And immediately the diagnosis came through. It's polio. That dread disease that we have now eradicated from our lives. And the diagnosis also came back that he will never walk again. Now, isn't that a blow to be struck? What would you do? Well, you have a trust fund. You like working with your stamps. You can do volunteer work. And that's what most people thought he was going to do. But he began a vigorous program of improving his health, his ability one day to walk. He bought a hotel in southern Georgia, Warm Springs, found the waters there to be almost miraculous in their soothing qualities, began to try to walk in every way he could, had a car rigged up for him in which he could drive it without his legs, terrifying his friends as he sped all along the rough Georgia roads, and also seeing for the first time the grinding poverty of both African Americans and white Americans who lived there in the South. People whose children went to bed hungry every night, who had diseases that they couldn't pay a doctor to cure, had no decent medical care, and began to understand what poverty really meant. and he was determined to go back into politics. By 1924, walking on his braces, he could speak at the Democratic National Convention. And by 1928, with the admonition of the Democratic Party, he ran for governor of New York, was successful enough to win a second term. And then came the question of who was going to be the Democratic nominee for 1932. Well, some shrewd politicians in the Democratic Party assumed that the Republicans would lose the election, but had no idea of how to fix the economy after the great crash of 1929. Thus, Roosevelt accepted the nomination and won in a landslide. And now, on this March the 4th, 1933, he stepped forward to give his inaugural address. Now, at one point, some years ago, a great deal was made out of Roosevelt criticizing him for trying to hide his disability. He wasn't hiding it. Everybody in that audience, everybody listening to him on the radio, they knew he walked on great, heavy steel braces. They knew that he had to hold the podium so tight that sometimes it would snap off in his hands. But to them, he was like this country, disabled, but fighting back. So it was a mixture of hope and fear. Fear that he would do nothing, say nothing but platitudes, that you listened with your fellow citizens all across the country. This is a day of national consecration, he began. Consecration, where did you hear that word? In Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And as I go through the inaugural address of Roosevelt, I will paraphrase, I will even adapt it at some point to our own circumstances today. On this day of my inauguration into the presidency of the United States, I am convinced that the American people expect me to speak to them with all the frankness and decisiveness that our current situation compels us. This is preeminently a time for speaking the truth, the whole truth, boldly and frankly. Therefore, let me state my firm conviction that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Unreasoning fear, nameless fear, unjustified fear that transforms every attempt at advance into retreat. Now, that's a cliche today. It wasn't then, and you recognized immediately that's what it was. You were just afraid that you were never going to be able to take care of your family. This great nation will endure as it has endured. This great nation will revive. This great nation will prosper. At every moment in our country's history, the American people have responded to firm, decisive, frank leadership. I know that you will give me that support, which is essential to victory. In that spirit, let us face our common problems. Thank God that they concern only material values. Throughout this speech, he will repeat again and again that as long as we keep our moral values, then we can overcome any economic crisis. But the situation is critical. Values have sunk to fantastic lows, so low that you could not have imagined them a year ago. You could not have imagined them in 1929. The stock market has collapsed utterly. And millions of Americans are unemployed. They face the daily struggle for existence with no idea of how they are going to feed their families. Millions more toil with insufficient recompense. Millions of Americans have lost their homes, their farms. Millions have watched the accumulated savings of a lifetime dwindle to nothing. Our crops lie plentiful in the fields, but they rot there while children go hungry in the cities. Why? We have not been struck by a plague of locusts. No, it is because of the failure of the rulers of the exchange of mankind's goods. The bankers, the financiers, big business. They are the money changers in the temple of our great civilization. They have failed. They have failed because of their stupidity, their incompetence, their greed. They have failed, and as a solution they say, we have lost all of our money. Lend us more money. Give us a bailout. No. We have driven the money changers from the civilization of our high temple. And we will rebuild that temple on the most enduring moral values. We will come again to understand that a position of trust in politics and in the financial world is just that, a position of trust. It is not just a means for getting money for yourself. We will come to understand again the dignity of work and of doing a good job in and for itself. We will come to understand the excitement of creative activity. My dear friends, these dark days will be worth all that it has cost us if we can come to understand one more time that it is our mission to take care of ourselves, to help others, not to have others take care of us. But the solution to our national economic crisis is one of more than ethics. It requires action, and action now. And it is just such action I propose that we undertake immediately. We are at war with this depression. And as during the Great War, we conscripted millions of Americans into our armed services. Now let us conscript millions of willing Americans into a civilian conservation corps, a WPA, where the vast natural resources of our land can be used to give them jobs, meaningful jobs, rebuilding our infrastructure, putting us on a path to new industries, building monuments of enduring value. And indeed, you can still walk through almost any town in the United States and see a sidewalk that was built by the WPA, or visit a state park that was built by the WPA. We can and must, under national planning, use the government to mobilize all the sources of communication, transportation, utilities, all those in which government has a proper role to play in order to restore our national economy. We must restore confidence in the banks. We must restore confidence in our financial system. Now, in undertaking these great tasks, we will put America first. This is a worldwide depression, but we cannot wait on the rest of the world. We cannot help the rest of the world. We must help ourselves first and foremost. We will be a good neighbor to any nation that wants to be our good neighbor. But we are taking care of America's economic problem. Anyone who properly judges the feelings of the American people at this moment know that they are prepared as a disciplined army to move forward to fight this war against the depression. They are willing, they want strong, effective leadership. And in that spirit, I accept their call for leadership. Now, this great problem can be solved under our traditional form of government. The Constitution, as handed down to us by our ancestors, is the most flexible instrument of government ever devised by the mind of man. Under it, a continent has been settled, a civil war fought, a great war has been fought. And we can address these problems and solve them within our traditional framework of a separation of legislative and executive powers. Therefore, I propose to send immediately to Congress proposals of my own to take needed action. I expect to receive from Congress proposals out of its wisdom. But if Congress does not act upon my proposals, if Congress does not send me adequate proposals of its own, then as my constitutional duty, I am prepared to ask from Congress executive powers as broad and sweeping as if we were invaded by a foreign foe. We march forward as a disciplined army. We march forward in the warm glow of national unity. We march forward with a clear consciousness that we are restoring old and precious values. We march forward in the clean satisfaction of each and every one of us, young and old, doing our duty. The American people have not failed. Democracy has not failed. The American people have gone to the polls, and they have registered a clear mandate for action and change. I am the present instrument of that will. On this day of national consecration, I ask the blessing of God. May He bless each and every one of you. May He guide my steps in the days to come. There you had it. There was hope again. But I'm telling you now, this and forever. The inaugural speech can be wonderful. You've got to take action. It's what you accomplish. You may disagree with Roosevelt, but he demanded action and action now. He bombarded Congress with carefully prepared bills. Bills that Congress, with a number of progressive Republicans supporting him, passed until it became almost a rubber stamp. A National Recovery Act regulating the labor and business. Great plans like the Civilian Conservation Corps and WPA that you saw every day hard at work. Reorganizing the welfare system, Social Security, and actions like building the Tennessee Valley Authority with its great dams, bringing water and fertility to large portions of the country. Some of these ran up against strong opposition, including from the Supreme Court. But he pushed on. Now you can say, oh, unemployment didn't drop drastically, the stock market did not bound back, but the American people had hope. Those breadlines disappeared, and they themselves registered their opinion of Roosevelt and his actions when the '36 election came. This time, all but 2 states voted for Roosevelt in an enormous landslide, endorsing his bold policies, really transforming the country, transforming it in ways that are still with us today and still a matter of controversy, but putting firmly in place the idea that a big government that reached out to help those who could not help themselves, to give them equality of opportunity, a land of freedom and opportunity for all. That was Franklin Roosevelt's great legacy. And so it was, with the war clouds already gathering in Europe in 1940, he would take another bold step, knowing that America must be drawn into this great struggle for freedom. And thus, despite livid criticism from his enemies, he broke the long tradition going back to Washington and asked the American people for a 3rd term. And such was the hope, the confidence they had in Roosevelt the man, Roosevelt and his principles, Roosevelt and his accomplishments, that he was returned for that third term and would prove himself to be, as he had been a great leader in time of economic crisis, the greatest leader of his day during World War II.
The Story of Freedom in America with Dr. J. Rufus Fears is made possible by the generous support of our Freedom and Heritage sponsors. The Story of Freedom in America is a program of the Institute for the American Constitutional Heritage at the University of Oklahoma, in partnership with the Alumni Association of the University of Oklahoma. For more videos and podcasts, visit freedom.ou.edu.